Yeah, I was told, and I kind of got it through reading the scripture. And I always love to point out that I picked the book up one day, the Bible, and I began to read. I read every single word, the begats and everything, without missing a word. And I did it in 3 months. And it was mind-blowing to read it in the chronological order that it is written in, since it is inspired and written. And in the book itself, it says wolves have entered in. But as you read it, ask for wisdom and the Holy Spirit, the knowledge of what man has actually incorporated into it becomes very apparent. And there are parts where when Jesus died, those 3 days, his spirit went in purgatory because he had been contaminated in this world and had to be purified, and that made sense to me because fire is a purification. And in the chemical world, if there is an element or molecule that is put into another element, it becomes contaminated and needs to be moved. That's how I had it explained to me. And then he ascended, because that's why when he appeared to the apostles, he said, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father." But he had been through the fire of cleansing. And if they would have touched him, he would have had to go through it all again. And when I heard that, it made perfect sense. Because we could always wonder why he said, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father." He was saying, you don't contaminate me, I'm cleansed.
And welcome to tonight's summit with Michael Seegers, Laura J, and everyone else who has chose to come here today on this beautiful Good Friday. We have a special session today as a part 2 of Jesus and who is Jesus and why did his story matter, was what we covered last Friday evening. And this Friday, on Good Friday, Michael is actually going to be sharing about Jesus part 2 and the ascension process and the science behind what we celebrate without necessarily fully understanding. So, Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Excellent, Laura. I don't know if you had a chance to see your email. I sent you about an hour ago a link to a video that was just put up on YouTube recently about the lost years, and that's where we began the conversation last week. Nicholas Notovich and his journey into Tibet and the book that he wrote. And so it was just wonderful to find that video, and it's now available so you can see the evidence that we were discussing. There are many parts to the story that are not recorded in the scripture, and there are many indications in the scripture that give details that are not commonly discussed because either they're not known or they're not understood in the proper context. I'm having visual distractions on my screen again. And what's really fascinating is that when you study the growth of the Christian tradition, you'll find that it has a number of elements that were absent in what Jesus was teaching. And so you'll find in the scripture, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, and yet people often have claimed he is the Son of God and the one and only Son of God. And so we talked about that last week, about the Christ consciousness being something that we all have, and that what Jesus came to demonstrate was to become that Christ. And his message, all these things will ye do, and even greater things, because I go unto the Father. Which means that we are intended to become the Christ as he did. And so when we show in the chart of the divine self that the Christ consciousness stands between the I am presence and the lower self, individual human consciousness, it brings clarity to the statement that was recorded about Jesus when he said, "No man goeth unto the Father but through me." And it has been misinterpreted that you had to go through Jesus personally to get back to God, when what he meant was you had to go through the Christ consciousness to get back to God. Now, that doesn't in any way take away from the significance, the importance of the role that Jesus played when we talk about him standing between us and our returning karma, and what a tremendous act of grace that is to have him in that capacity. But there's another interesting piece that I would bring to your attention. If we look at Genesis 14:18, and we discover Melchizedek in the Old Testament, and Melchizedek was described as having no beginning and no ending, not born of earthly parents. And who was Melchizedek? And then why, in Psalms 110, verse 4, describing the coming Jesus as the fulfillment of the prophecy about becoming a priest of the order of Melchizedek. And then looking in Hebrews 7:17, I believe, where specifically St. Paul is describing Jesus as being a priest forevermore after the order of Melchizedek. And it begs the question, at least in my mind, if the spiritual hierarchy was God the Father and then Jesus and everybody below that, then how did Jesus become a priest after the order of Melchizedek? And why was Melchizedek not a priest after the order of Jesus? It's a question I've not been able to get suitable answers from in Christian circles, but the Ascended Masters give great clarity on that subject. And it just goes back to what is the spiritual hierarchy and who are the Ascended Masters, and what are the offices that they hold. And as we discussed in the lost years and Jesus going to India and Ladakh and Tibet and being trained there under his guru, Lord Maitreya, Lord Maitreya holds the office of Cosmic Christ. And so there are these different levels in the hierarchy. It's much more complex than just simple Father, Son, and Holy Spirit concept that's taught in the Christian tradition. Jesus actually holds the office of world teacher. Jesus actually is, by definition, as the Master described him, a Buddha. And for anybody who's strictly Christian in their understanding, that's quite a statement. By definition, a Buddha is one who has balanced 100% of his karma. And we know that there are ascended masters who have not balanced 100% of their karma. They've made their ascension after balancing 51% of their karma, so they have become an ascended master, but they have not yet become a Buddha. So again, levels of consciousness in the order of hierarchy that bear closer scrutiny and require definition. I would speak for a moment to what Valerie brought up about the 3 days. Where was Jesus? And Valerie uses the term purgatory because that's the way it's described in that tradition. And we talk about planes of consciousness, and we talk about the astral plane. The masters talk about how the astral plane has 33 levels, and the lowest levels of the astral plane being likened very much to a prison. And the concept of purgatory reflects that very well. We know that part of the mission that Jesus fulfilled was preaching to spirits in the lower astral plane, some so low that they might be called hell worlds, but definitely purgatory describes that. And so I would add to what Valerie's insight was, and I would suggest that there was also a contamination that he picked up when he was performing that work in those lower astral planes, and had some of that contaminant that needed to be cleansed further. And then one of the shortcomings of the scriptures is not everything's documented. and some of it is allegorical. And in the archives of the Brotherhood, we have the actual record that show that Jesus lived beyond 33 years. He was here to the age of 84 when he finally made his ascension. And I'll touch upon ascension for a moment with two different concepts that really are worth looking at. We talk about ascended masters, and we also talk about unascended masters. And there's tremendous misunderstanding on the terminology. When we go into Buddhist tradition and we discover that there are men and women who, through rigorous exercises, spiritual disciplines, perfect themselves to the point where they become an unascended master, and then eventually, when they make their transition, they manifest what's called a rainbow body. It's a light body that will be seen in the sky and often hovering above the monasteries for days and weeks at a time. And they call it a rainbow body because the tremendous light that's being emitted and the tremendous bands of color that are being emitted through the aura. And the question that I have not sufficiently answered is, have they gone through an ascension process yet? I'm not yet certain. It's certainly a powerful phenomenon. When we study the traditions of yogis, and we look, for example, at the autobiography of a yogi that was written by Paramahansa Yogananda, and we learn about the tradition of the lineage of gurus going back to Babaji Nagaraj, and Babaji looks like he's 35 years old, but he's over 600. And what Babaji talks about is that he chose to keep his physical body. He said, I will stay here until the last human makes their ascension. And he said, in the community where I hang out, he said, I'm one of the youngsters. And it is known that there are unascended masters still wearing their physical body beyond the age of 10,000 years, right here on planet Earth. And so they have chosen not to ascend at this time. They're walking what we call the path of the Bodhisattva. It's a path of service. And they have total control over every atom in their physical body. They can dematerialize at will. They can teleport. They can levitate. They can walk on water. They can raise the dead, heal the sick. They can do everything that an ascended master can do. And yet they have not gone through the ascension process. So we call them unascended masters. And they're not just in India. They're in other places here on Earth. Becoming an ascended master is a specific initiation that is earned by merit and provided as an act of grace. And for most candidates, it will occur at the Ascension Temple in Luxor, Egypt. And that is one place where Jesus went through a number of his initiations. And Serapis Bey is the initiator at the temple. He's been there for a few thousand years. And that initiation will take place for some individuals actually in their physical body, and for others after their physical body has been put to rest, they will be in their etheric body. But either way, they will be in the Ascension Temple, and the Ascension flame will be passed through them. So 3 hierarchs, Serapis Bey and 2 others, will stand there holding what are called rods of power, which have large crystals on the top. And the Ascension ray will be transmitted from a higher dimension and focused through the 3 rods of power, through the 3 hierarchs, and directed at the individual standing on the dais. And the Ascension flame will burst into activity and consume whatever is left of that etheric body. And the deathless solar garment which is woven by the candidate through spiritual exercises, through not just years of service, but lifetimes of service and commitment to this path, will be the garment that they stand in after the flame has passed through them. And we talked about last week briefly, the blood in the veins turns into liquid golden light. Every atom of the four lower bodies is transmuted. And this generally takes place in Egypt. It's not the only place it occurs. When we read Unveiled Mysteries by Saint Germain, we discover that there have been individuals that had this activity occurring in a different location, but the process is identical. It is the ascension flame, which is the white fire core of Mother, vibrating at a tremendously high frequency that rearranges the atomic structure of the four lower bodies. So the physical body, the astral body, the mental body, and the etheric body. All 33 subplanes of all four of those planes of matter, the molecules are brought into a high state of vibration and realigned to the divine blueprint where the atom Kadmon image is what is now the pattern of the light body of the newly ascended master. It's a profound science. It's an incredibly profound science. Hopefully that brings some clarity to you and bring on the questions.
With transmuting 100% of the karma, or even 51% of karma, how does one actually do that?
By good deeds, one accrues good karma. And we talked about in the electronic belt that we all carry, the residual untransmuted density of all the errors of all of our previous lifetimes resides. And so that needs to be either transmuted or brought into balance. Largely through pain and suffering, that energy is transmuted. That's how most people transmute it. It's brought into balance through good works. And the science of the violet flame is the actual alchemical science by which the transmutation occurs. So when we have the opportunity to observe the record, or even in conversation with Jesus, talk about, hey, how did you do that turning water into wine trick? He will tell you it was through the release of the violet flame through his chakras. And so we have chakras in our hands. They're able to transmit rays, and transmitting through those chakras, the violet flame will flow. And we've studied this and discussed it in greater detail in the other videos that we did about what happens alchemically, what happens on the atomic level. The substance is transformed by the activity of that flame. That's what violet flame does. And so when violet flame is applied to karma, it removes the burden of the imperfect pattern, which is an act of mercy and an act of love, which is more related to the pink flame. And we say it's simple color science because blue and pink make violet. And then the divine blueprint is what is restored, and that's the activity of blue rays. So the blue and pink combined give the violet ray in terms of an energy pattern. The activity is a transmutation which restores the divine blueprint, removes the error. And when that occurs with karmic density, when that substance in the electronic belt is touched by the violet flame, it is restored to its pristine purity, and that's how it can be stored back in the causal body. Now, when the total energy allotment of a life stream is brought back into balance so that you have more above you than you have below you, you get to that 51% point, you can become a candidate for the ascension. This is under the new dispensation from 100 years ago. And so as an ascended master, you can then balance the rest of your karma. But eventually that electronic belt is going to be reduced to zero. So there is no more density. There is no more substance requiring transmutation. There is no more karmic burden. It's all been purified and raised into the causal body. And 100% of the energy of your life stream going back to your first incarnation now has a clean and balanced record.
So in the video that we had done about why a spiritual path is often more difficult than one that just chooses materialism and following the well-trodden path of the masses, essentially, is it walking through the karma in our electronic belt that we're doing? Or I know when you had shared it, you had said about it's more difficult on a spiritual path because we're actually facing our karma as we return back to the great central sun.
Well, what we're walking through is not just our own personal karma. We're walking through the planetary effluvia as well. And all the karmic burden that we have participated in, that we have a share in, that we have a co-responsibility for. There are deeper levels of karma that we haven't had conversation about yet. We talked briefly about the karma dark cycle that was released in April 1969. And that was karma that was held back for more than 10,000 years. And the great law was such that it was coming due. It could not be held back any longer. And so that as that came forward for release, and the Lords of Karma had a number of meetings, they were going to release it a bit earlier, and they held it back twice in the 60s, and finally in 1969 it had to be released. And we have come to understand that that spiral of release is still ongoing. And so every month on the 23rd of the month, there is another portion of that we have to deal with. And for that reason, one of the masters, a great Buddha from the star system Sirius, where the court of the sacred fire is, his name is Surya, came to planet Earth and gave us a very special dispensation. He said on the 23rd, and it's the day that we call Surya Day, he said, those of you that give 3 hours of violet flame will have that particular burden for the entire month cleansed, transmuted, and removed, so you don't have to deal with it. And so most of the diligent students, every month on the 23rd, they do their 3 hours of violet flame because they understand the value of that. It's a tremendous dispensation. People that don't have that awareness, don't have that gift of the violet flame, unfortunately, are still burdened by that because it's released to everybody on the planet. And those of us that are walking the spiritual path, as we said, you're coming back home now, you're having to face your karma. You're not in the mode of creating karma unconsciously anymore. Hopefully, you're dealing with the burden of cleaning it up, and it's a big job. So you've got your personal karma, you've got your planetary karma, you've got your karma of the dark cycle. There's a lot of stuff going on. And then there's testing and initiation on the path. And that just occurs through the events in your life. And it's always the test of self-mastery and how do you respond to everything that you're having to deal with. And based on your attainment of self-mastery, those initiations will become progressively more challenging. It is necessary because what you're here to do is become the Christ, not play in kindergarten. So you need to be tested at greater levels of challenge in order to get that self-mastery and that final prize of becoming the Christ.
In terms of corruption, earlier before we went live on Facebook, Valerie had mentioned about the descension where Jesus, I don't know how to frame it properly, but what I'm taking from that and just kind of bringing into this is about the corruption of the DNA. And so really wanting to better understand about what happens when there is corruption in the body, as is what's happening on a global scale right now with people being subject to gene therapy, and how that's an attack on the Christos DNA, so far as what I am seeing. And so I bring that forward because it's just come to me a couple times through all of this, and I wonder what your perspective is on that.
It's just another level of the same thing. You look in the New Testament and read the letters from the Apostle Paul, the letters in the Hebrews, the Philippians, Thessalonians, Colossians. You're going to find in there references to corruption and the body corruptible and the body incorruptible, and that which is corruptible cannot inherit the kingdom that is incorruptible. So he's talking about the physical body cannot be translated into the higher dimensions, the spirit world. It requires the light body to do that. And that's all about the ascension science. And so what's occurring on a planetary level is spiritual warfare, and it's attacked. The fallen ones have been at this for literally millions of years. And they have very, very devious methodologies beyond what you can imagine, that are intelligent beyond what you can imagine, that know exactly how to stand between you and your goal, your personal Christhood. And so this spiritual warfare manifests in many, many ways. And you're seeing one of these ways now through the medical community, and this idea that you need to get a vaccine, which is ridiculous, ignores a lot of science, and is specifically designed to reduce the light within you and your ability to make it to your goal.
So in terms of corruption and the light body, what is the light body? If you can speak more into that in relation to Jesus and how he was able to ascend, and the light body. All of these terms are not as familiar to people that have not been studying the teachings of the Ascended Masters for 40 plus years. So like yourself. So I just share that for anyone that's not familiar with Michael yet. He has been a student and teacher of the teachings of the Ascended Masters for 40 plus years, and has studied a lot of the religions just to really gain a context for what he's now able to bring together in a bigger way. So,
well, I'm using language that I hope is approachable to most people. There's a different language that the masters would use, and I'm avoiding that intentionally. When we look at what is the source of all that is, and without using the word God, I think light is a comfortable term that most people are okay with. And then what is that doesn't appear to be so perfect in this world? And we could say, well, that is certainly not light, and maybe we call that darkness or lack of light. And when we look from a scientific point of view, the spectrum of visible light is part of a larger electromagnetic spectrum that contains many frequencies, some vibrating slower than light, some vibrating faster than light. But all of that energy, I would suggest, is light. You don't have to call it light. You can call it energy, call it whatever you want. Call it God, doesn't matter. We depict that in the chart of the divine self as pure white light. And we talk about the scientific experiment of passing light through a prism where it reflects a rainbow, and we see what we call the components of light, or the visible components of light. All of that is physical light. We understand physical light. You turn on a light switch, you have light. We know what light is. But vibrating on a much higher frequency in the spiritual dimension, there is spiritual light. And I'm going to suggest that it is that substance, that spiritual energy, that makes up the light body. As the masters have called it, the deathless solar body, it is distinctly different from what we might call the astral body. And anybody who has ever discovered that they can do astral projection and project their consciousness out of their physical body, which is largely what happens during sleep, they will be traveling on what is known as the astral planes. It's a different frequency of consciousness, separate from their physical body, which is sleeping. The astral body is not the light body. There is another body that we call the mental body, and there's another body that we call the etheric body, or the fire body, or sometimes called the memory body. And these are all part of the form that we walk around in. So we've discussed the 4 planes of matter: fire, air, water, and earth, that make up the physical plane. The physical planet, the physical solar system, the entire universe is contained in these 4 interpenetrating force fields. And so you can do soul travel in your etheric body, and some people may call that a light body because compared to the astral body, it's certainly more vibrant, certainly cleaner, although not pure and pristine by any means, but able to move in higher frequency ranges, which we call the etheric plane. But this is still part of the material world, the planes of matter. To get above the level of the Christ consciousness, and we describe the Christ consciousness as the mediator between the planes of spirit and matter, to go into the spirit worlds requires this deathless solar body that I speak of. And that is the light body I think that you're asking me about. And that is a body that is woven from the energies that come to us from the divine self, from the heart of the I Am presence. It is consciously created through spiritual exercises, much of which is the science of the spoken word. And it is a garment of light that is created specifically for the ascension ritual, so that we will have that as a vehicle of expression when we become ascended masters. It will then be our light body that we take with us wherever we go in the universe.
Is it like the Merkaba? I've heard about the Merkaba being connected to the light body and how we transport ourselves through various galaxies.
There's a lot of interesting ideas floating around about Merkaba, which is a word from the Hebrew. And when you study Kabbalah, you will encounter this. It's often described as a pair of spinning tetrahedrons. So it's the Star of David in 3 dimensions, one pyramid pointing up, one tetrahedron, which is a 4-sided pyramid pointing up, and one pointing down. I'm not certain that it's helpful to compare that to the deathless solar body, because I think that they're probably 2 different things. I think it's possible that the Merkaba is a vehicle that may be used by higher dimensional beings that is made of light, but I don't have enough confirmed information to really speak about that. One of the problems with terminology and a lot of the stuff that's come out in what are New Age circles in the last 30, 40 years, there's a proliferation of information that's coming through psychic channels and through what we call false hierarchy sources. And it gets mixed and blended in with a lot of the truth information that's available. and it creates a heap of confusion. And I spent many years studying Kabbalah, and I've had conversations with very, very learned rabbis about some of the finer points that we had questions about. And I'm still left with questions in my own thinking. So I don't want to put forward information that I'm not completely certain about. I have my own speculations about some things. But Merkaba is not something that I think people are going to be able to get reliable information about. And it's not spoken of in that terminology by the Ascended Masters. And I think there's a reason for that. So they've done their utmost to use terminology in the English language that is very, very simplified and very approachable, and done their utmost to remove some of these concepts that are more complex and possibly not helpful to the understanding.
It's coming to me that Mer, Ka, and Ba is representative of the body, mind, and spirit. So that was just something that I just recently saw in notes that I was reviewing. And so I just only put that forward as I still don't really understand Jesus and the full ascension process. I'm still not clear on the science behind that, or just how it's achievable for others to be able to do as well, for us to be able to do as the unascended masters that still have a lot of karma to be able to clear, at least for myself personally, I know.
Well, it was interesting that you broke up the word into 3 syllables, Mer, Ka, and Ba, because the Ka is spoken of by the masters, and they talk about the astral Ka, which is what is left over when you physically put the body to rest permanently. So when the body dies, the soul exits the body. There is still the residual energy from the astral plane. It's called the astral Ka. And part of the ascension requirement is that the astral Ka be also captured and transmuted, lest it be roaming the earth as incomplete work. It is an actual contamination. And when you go to a cemetery, that is what's generally floating around the cemeteries. And they're floating all over the planet, the astral cause of everybody who's ever died. So you've lived 1,000 lifetimes, and you have 1,000 astral cause still floating around the astral plane that have to get cleaned up as part of the ascension process. So I don't think you're going to get the kind of understanding that you want in one conversation or 1 week or 1 month, because the science is so profound. It requires a lifetime of study. And I think you need to just take some comfort in the knowledge that the teachers are there, the science is known, and you walk the path one day at a time, and you just bite off one spoonful at a time.
Fair enough. Ladies, do you have any questions that you wanted to bring forward today? In the comments, Bergie had also mentioned that with her roots being Bosnian, in Slavic culture, Good Friday is not considered the same way. It's called Big Friday. So I'm not sure whether you had read that in the comments there, or you have a comment to that comment to share.
I've not heard that before. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't have a comment for that, no.
Valerie?
That's news to me. Big Friday. But there's a terminology going around nowadays. People are always saying, "Oh, that resonated with me," or so. I suppose the proper word for understanding would be resonated completely, and actually recreated symbolism of it in my life. Just it's Da Vinci stuff. But anyway, Merkaba, MERKABA, Kabah, maybe?
That's correct, yeah.
Does it have an H on the end of it?
It does.
Oh, very good.
Okay, because I've never heard of that, but how did you describe that? And just explain the geometry of it is what I'm asking.
If you look at platonic solids,
Mm-hmm.
the simplest one that has sides, not a sphere, is the tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron has 4 faces. Each one is an equilateral triangle.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I
if
made a
you put
replica of
2
that
of them
in my
together,
house. Okay. Yeah,
if you put 2 of them
basically.
together, you would get something not quite an octahedron, because an octahedron has 8 faces. 2 tetrahedrons that are touching each other would only have 7 faces. Sorry, they would actually only have 6 faces.
Very interesting.
They would have,
The grid pattern.
they would have a
Mm-hmm.
they would have a point on the top and they'd have a point on the bottom. Now, if you were to press them through each other for another inch, then you would get a star pattern.
Yes, I've seen this yesterday, as a matter of fact. Isn't that interesting? I saw something on I don't know if it was a memory of mine that popped up on Facebook or whatever, but how it intermingles with itself is actually the Fibonacci, I think it's, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's a pattern. It repeats itself. It's even in our DNA, and it just keeps replicating, like the tesseract. We're just in and out, and angles. I'm trying to get a visual when I close my eyes. I used to be very clear on this stuff for a
It's like a
reason.
Star of David, but
Yes.
I have meditation cubes that are in the form of a Merkabah that are amethyst. I just can't figure out where I have put them. Otherwise, I would have been able to give a showing of what the Merkabah looks like from.
Oh, perhaps they'll give off energy and you'll find them. Because we speak of them. Maybe they will cry out to you. I don't know how that stuff works, but it, good.
Did you have any questions around Jesus and the Ascension, or anything that Michael has spoken of tonight so far, Valerie?
Not unless he could give me the chemical equation of what God was thinking about the blood being shed. I don't know.
Blood being what?
shed.
Shed. Yeah. What was
Talking
the
about
chemical equation?
Jesus on the cross.
What's the answer to that equation? Yeah.
The crucifixion of Jesus is described by the masters as an ancient bloodletting ceremony of the fallen angels. It's specifically designed to steal the light out of the body. And it was something that was required of Jesus, as his path of personal Christhood was one of balancing a tremendous amount of planetary karma. But it's not something that would be correctly understood as something God would design for us of the light, because the design of that initiation was not of the light. It was an ancient bloodletting ceremony that was originally created and perpetrated by fallen angels. And Jesus is not the only person that's ever happened to.
No, and it used to happen with the animals that they were instructed to give sacrifice of. leading up to. So what comes next? I don't know. But we're in a time frame and headed universe unfolding develops. I mean, it's already there. We will discover it by chance or by choice. And we can only speak it in human language. It's mind-boggling. And instead of getting more answers, we're just getting more questions because of what's happened so rapidly. I think so, because I think it's all funneling down to the point. Okay, now I'm not going to go any further because now we're talking about black holes or a birth canal thing, but what's happening. And that's why I'm here. I am so interested. You and Laura put me in the most peaceful state of being when I hear you speak. Everywhere else I go in the world, I nod and shake my head, and it's like, I've already been in kindergarten, but they need leaders. It's like, that's not who I am right now. I need to be speaking among wisdom because I haven't studied anything. What I know is from my inward parts. And I got contacted with Laura, and I think that we're here to raise the vibration. People can talk about it, but I can feel it. We're actually doing it, and this is all we need to do. We don't really need to do anything except for what we're doing. And the frequency, the vibration. Jesus simply said, I am the way, the truth, the light. I don't like words confusing me. God made sure he gave me the head injury because of being very articulate and my vocabulary, and I had one of those some kind of mind. You see something and read it, even in the Bible, I could tell you what scripture and page it was on. I lost all that for a reason. And I think I'm beginning to understand the reason for that after having son pass away a year ago. I just am getting so much. And I know, even though through the pain and the passing, the vibration, the energy is teaching me, he was here sent to teach me, and vice versa, you know. But just the pattern of the way, the truth, the light. And that's where I think of the blood. No one comes to the Father except through me. And it's the blood of the Christ. And I always laugh at myself and I'm like, God, what's that chemical equation? I do. I ask him, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just trying to get myself really clear.
Well, I'm glad that you're sensitive to the vibration, because we do.
I wear a Rasta stone around my neck that was given to me by a true Rasta because he saw something. I mean, I can't say, I don't mean to speak over you. I am speaking over you because I feel a pressure in my brain. My neurotransmitters are trying to breathe. As we speak, I can feel that. Physician, heal thyself. I've healed so many things. And I actually want to turn my video on. This part of the brain right here needs attention, and I don't know what is in here. You can see the eye here, and it is the left side. And it used to be over here. I healed that, but now it's right here. It's still blocked. That's a weird question. Do you know what my brain is?
So we are radiating the frequency of peace as we are discussing the principle. And I had another comment about the blood that you'll find significant, and that is another demonstration of the bloodletting perpetrated by the fallen angels is war. The only reason war exists on this planet
True.
is for the purpose of shedding blood so they can steal the light. And this has been going on for since before we existed.
And to also
Everybody has light in their blood.
with
Oh, I've never heard it said that way, Michael, but
I also literally just heard from Mark Christopher in one of his videos that the war is actually to make sure, because in this world you can't actually catch up to the interest that's being accrued on fiat currency, and so in order to make sure that they don't have to deal with that, they send the pawns into battle in order to make sure that they don't have to pay the interest that's being charged, and that they actually be paid if they made it. So I put that forward because it was just a couple days ago, and you bring up the mention of war, and it is about the letting of blood, but it is also about the capital gains and all of the commercial component where people are being put under the profits and the plan of the dark forces that have really been in control of the planet here to an extent, and yet the light has won already is something that you often remind me, especially in the last year while I've been going down the rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and all the rest of the darkness that is currently unfolding. So
financial matrix, yeah, weaponized information, and they slowly did that. I hear the story about how many people, they're like, with that large elephant in the circus with a small chain to a wooden pole. How does that keep that big elephant? It doesn't. It was just away. When it was small, it couldn't break away when it tried to, and it just associated. That's the way it is, and that's the way people are right now, you know.
And it brings to mind,
it's sad.
it brings to mind
it brings to mind ascension in the more recent conversations with the Great Awakening and people talking about planetary ascension. And there's a lot of concepts and information that's just not complete about what that might mean. It is true that consciousness is awakening worldwide. It is true that the vibration of the planet is increasing to a higher frequency worldwide.
Yeah, it is.
That is not technically what the ascension is. There will be a point when the planet itself may ascend into a higher vibration. It is actually the spiritual destiny of the planet to do so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. However, the process by which that occurs is going to,
you know, this third planet from this sun in this solar system, that's not where we're ascending to. And the whole planet, I had said the same thing. That in itself is a chemical equation.
the planet itself is a conscious being. It is part of a system of planets, some of which are visible through our modern science and some of which are invisible. And the entire system of planets has its own spiritual destiny, which is ascending into a higher vibration to fulfill that purpose. That cannot occur until a huge percent of the population makes their
That's,
individual ascensions.
I know that's true. And that's why we're all on together through the electromagnetic current, form that pattern. Something like that is what's going on.
This is this is why the
Mhm.
masters have released the teaching to us about the violet flame. Because when we release the violet flame to the planet, it benefits not just ourselves individually, but it transmutes the energy of the entire planet, and it raises the frequency of the entire planet. So for a planetary ascension to occur, a tremendous cleansing is necessary, and the violet flame is the tool that will accomplish that.
And we can actually fuel it and speed its coming.
That is what we are intended to do.
Yes, we are, aren't we? You're the first. Yes, yes, yes. This is our intention. This has been my knowledge since I've been about 12 years old.
We have new students coming in every week, and it's such a joy to watch them experience for the first time the violet flame in their lives, because they phone, they email, they're just jumping excited about, you can't believe what just happened. And we're going, oh, yes, we can. That's why we're teaching it to you.
Yes, I have ascended to the third heaven, and what you see there cannot be expressed in human language, but my being just became, I'm allergic to static electricity. And just recently, as you were speaking, for the first time in numerous was there. Whether I'm in it or it's in me or whatever, it makes no difference to me. But I noticed for a second, even my speaker that always has static, at that same moment, the static silence. So we need confirmation, physical confirmation. I noticed those are the things that I notice. And I needed to share that with you. As you were speaking of the ascension, time stood still.
Thank you.
The frequency was in line. There was no static. First time that's happened to me.
It reminds me of a gentleman that came.
And thank you. It reminds you of what? I'm sorry.
A gentleman who came to our temple a couple of years ago. He had Parkinson's, and his shaking was just nonstop and very profound. And when we started the violet flame that evening, all of a sudden his shaking stopped.
That's right.
And he looked across the room at me he was dumbfounded, because he was holding his hands in front of him, and for the next 5 minutes they were motionless, no shaking, and he was just overwhelmed with joy. He understood in that moment what the violet flame was doing, and we all got to see it, because we knew his condition. He'd been with us for the whole evening, and we'd seen him sitting there and shaking and not having control of bodily functions. And then when we started the violet flame, all of it stopped, and his nervous system was in a condition that he had not ever imagined possible. And
he was aligned. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's who we are. Yeah.
For those.
So you have
Oh, yeah.
Laura?
I was just going to ask, and we'll talk about the Shambhala Temple of Light, because you can get more information.
Okay.
There's a broadcast every Saturday night, and Michael, he founded the Shambhala Temple of Light in 2008. So I'll let you, if you wanted to say anything more about that, Michael. I was going to ask you to speak into injuries around people who are being corrupted in their body by chemicals and external substances coming inside the body, who are having ramifications of such things. And it just struck me as it could be a very valuable gift to help somebody understand what the violet flame is, and whether Jesus actually was aware of the violet flame and used it himself. If you have any knowledge of that, considering that's what tonight is about expressly, and then how they might be able to use the violet flame to be able to help in transmuting some of the corruption that is unfortunately taking place at greater quantities than what is desirable.
There is no question Jesus was aware of the violet flame, and there is no question that he used the violet flame. It is not generally available to mainstream consciousness and has been withheld for 10,000 years. Only in the retreats of the masters was it available. So when Jesus went to Ladakh and Nepal and India and Tibet, and when he met with Lord Maitreya, there in the retreats, he would have been trained with the violet flame. There's no question that he used it. There's no question that he had access to it, knew it, and he teaches it today. And you can attend classes in his retreat in Saudi Arabia. You can travel there in your etheric body while you're sleeping at night. We have the instructions for how to do that available through our website or just through emailing to us. Becoming a student is part of what we teach. And in terms of toxic burden on the four lower bodies, doesn't matter if it's fluoride in the water or chemtrails in the air or GMOs in the food or wherever this burden enters the body. Violet flame does clean up and transmute and remove that burden. We have a lady who came to us about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and she'd been in a wheelchair and was looking at being in an institution for the rest of her life. Severe multiple sclerosis, destruction of her central nervous system through electroshock therapy, over a dozen treatments that way, and physically health compromised to the extreme. Mental condition, very challenged. Her ability just to follow a sentence and understand what we were teaching was very compromised. And if I introduce you to her today, you won't believe it's the same lady. To see her up and walking around and very much health improved and doing things that were impossible 5 years ago, and having her life restored to functionality is largely by her diligent application of the science of the spoken word and the use of the violet flame. Now, her case is a little bit extraordinary because her commitment and her dedication is extraordinary. At one point, she came to me and she said, "Can you adjust my spiritual program for me, because I think the exercise I'm doing needs some modification." And I looked at the program that I wrote for her 2 years earlier, and I said, "I'd like you to remove this, this, and this." I said, "I'm going to insert this new exercise for you, and I want you to do this one every day. It takes 90 minutes. Her entire spiritual program required 4 hours a day. She wasn't scared of that. She did what it took. And when you see her today, you'll understand why I wrote that program and why she did what she did, because she had the vision and understood what was possible. So any burden can be removed. The question is, how bad do you want it? How hard are you willing to work for it? And the bigger question is, if you knew that you could make your ascension in this lifetime, given the fact that your divine plan intended you to accomplish that hundreds of thousands of years ago, thousands of lifetimes ago, and you had not done so yet, but now the opportunity exists with the teachings of the Ascended Masters and the science of the violet flame, you can do it in this lifetime. Are you willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work and get the job done? Saint Germain has said, if you just give me this one lifetime, you can have it all. It's just a matter of commitment. Be willing to do the work. The teachings are there, and the rest is up to you.
Please let me say at this time, I am smiling from ear to ear because being an incredibly old soul as we are coming up on our 10,000 years. And I got tired and I told God, I said, I'm done. I don't want to work anymore. Well, you know what the universe does. It says, yeah, okay, do it your way, but then it funnels you right down to you have to do the work anyway. So here you guys are. Yeah, because I'm a workmates, because I did tell. And I call God, you know, creator, you know, energy source, whatever you want to use. God makes it, you know, simple. I told him, I'm not doing this by myself anymore. You give me a team or I quit. That's how I do talk to God, you know, by the way. I go boldly, you know.
And he answered
like he's my daddy, you know. So thank you guys. I'm just overjoyed, you know. My cup runneth over. I guess that's what this means. I don't know.
So it might be a perfect opportunity, Michael, to speak about the Shambhala Temple of Light as the one who founded it and what's available and how people can connect to it.
Yes, please. That's my question next. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
Laura, you were correct last week. It was actually 2007. So we're celebrating our 14th year this year. With COVID, we closed our physical location. We're operating strictly online. And we've taken the last year to really develop that capability. We now have students in more places than we had previously expected. I've got 3 in the UK, and we have 1 in Russia and several in the USA and across Canada now. And we're just creating a massive online marketing program to go across Canada. So we have, through Laura's assistance, produced a series of videos. The introductory class that I used to teach once a month, which was about a 3-hour session, is now 6 modules that are 40 minutes each. We have a website, we have a social media presence on the MeWe platform, where we have lessons available in the folders, and they're all just numbered: lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. And then the rest of what we do is through individual communication. We have a number of individuals that do some mentoring. I do a lot of it myself, and we do Zoom conferences, we do phone calls. Whatever is necessary to get you on board with the learning process. We have a tremendous library of material available. We have over 6,000 hours of lectures from the masters, from over 100 masters, angels, archangels, cosmic beings. We have access to physical library materials, so we have a small bookstore. And it's just a matter of connect with us, and we'll give you what you need and move you through this at whatever speed you're ready to go. We have now about 300 videos on our YouTube channel. I think a lot of the new people coming in are really appreciating that, to be able to just sit down with the videos and learn the material that way. And then when you're ready to join us on Saturday nights, we have the broadcast every week. We have a 1-hour beginners class at 7 p.m. and then we have our regular class from 8 until 10:30. And in the beginners class, we work with the science of the spoken word and the violet flame mantras. We teach you how to work with the mantras, going through the various chakras, how to invoke light. And then we have a 30-minute lecture from the discourses on cosmic law. And come and participate whenever you feel so inclined. If the 7 o'clock time slot doesn't work, everything is archived, so you can go and catch last week's class or last month's class or any class you want at any time. But if you want to be with us live, it'll be at 7 p.m. on Saturday. And
How do I access
We'll have a
that?
link.
Is that
If you go to ShambhalaTempleOfLight.com,
.com? Okay.
and
SHEMBALA, Shambhala.
I'm typing it in there for you.
AM,
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has an H after the
so
B.
you can create an account. You can create a free account there. You can send a request through our contact, and I'll respond to that. And then you'll be in the loop.
And also in relation to the comment around if I got to do this on my own, I'm not doing it anymore. You're not alone in that. And there are a lot of people that have been feeling alone for a long time, especially during these times. And so I feel like we'll wrap up within the next few minutes. Well, 10. Well, we'll wrap up around 8:30, I think, unless we can go further. Which certainly, if there are more questions, then we can certainly touch on those. But I think it would be really valuable, Michael, to actually introduce the Great White Brotherhood and just touch on who the Great White Brotherhood are, because somebody drawn to a call like this, even in the replay afterwards, are likely going to resonate because we're part of the 144,000 souls from the Great White Brotherhood that came here. Wasn't it with Al Moira? Or
Came with
Kamara? We follow?
Son of Kamar, yes.
Okay.
So if you think about what is heaven, well, that's where God is, if you believe in God. And that's where the angels are. And that's where the saints are. If you're good and you're good enough to become a saint, then you go to heaven, right? So heaven is the home of the spiritual hierarchy. And the spiritual hierarchy includes ascended masters. It includes Buddhas. It includes the saints that you might know from whatever tradition. You could be talking about Hindu saints, Catholic saints, Buddhist saints. You could be talking about angels. You could talk about Elohim, cosmic beings. That entire population comprises what the masters call the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood. So the word white denotes the pristine, pure white light that is the source of all that is, and it is the light that emanates from them. It's not about race or creed or color. It's just the white light. And it's called brotherhood because it's all one big family. It's the family of man, or womb man. Man, woman, human being. It's the family of all beings that exist. Brotherhood. And so you become a member of the brotherhood when you regain your stature by evolving out of the human consciousness and back into the spiritual dimension. We have all come from spirit. We are all on a journey returning to spirit. And the brotherhood is all a part of that. And the masters of the brotherhood are the teachers of humanity. They've always been with us.
In flesh?
In flesh. Masters walk the earth today. They always have. And that's why in the very first link in the document for the intro process for the students, the link goes to a website called Quora. And on Quora, I wrote an article answering the question, who are the Ascended Masters? And in that article, I provide a photograph of three masters. Two of them are unascended masters. It's the photo of Helen Blavatsky in India in the 1800s. And she is sitting in a chair. Behind her is El Morya and Kuthumi, who were unascended masters at that time. And the third gentleman is the immortal Count Saint Germain. And Saint Germain at that time had already made his ascension, and he was walking the earth as an ascended master. Photographic proof.
So we're not automatically part of the Great White Brotherhood. We have to earn our way into it, you're saying?
I think that would be a misunderstanding of what I'm trying to express. Because your soul originated there, that's where you come from. So you're part of that. But in your consciousness as a human, removed from that, you're not really participating in the Brotherhood. You're not a part of the Brotherhood until you reclaim that and come back to it.
I think this is where I was getting to, is Jesus, ascended master. We descend, yes, Michael. We descended, ascending, reascending, whatever you that must come down and vice versa. We are, as you use the word evolving, yes, evolving. Not like Darwin taught, but we are unfolding, we are evolving, we are progressing, we are finding our way back to our source.
The journey from source, from the planes of spirit
Yes.
into the planes of matter, has been a journey into a greater density of consciousness and a greater density of environment. And due to the momentums of error contained within the density, we have been pulled in a downward spiral, which is a descension process. And so the journey back home requires traveling an upward spiral, which is an ascension process. So we have definitely descended into matter, and we will ascend back into spirit.
And our emotions are part of that as well, in terms of the ascension and the descension as well. Would you agree?
I'm not sure what you're wanting to describe when you say our emotions are part of that.
Our
Emotions are feelings, and feelings are energy, are they not?
feelings are the interpretation of the energies in motion. What were you going to say, Michael?
It's part of the experience. It's part of the experience. We deal with a lot of different energies, and emotional energies comprise the flow of energy through the astral plane, through the astral body. We also deal with mental energies. We also deal with etheric energies. So it's one of the energies that we deal with.
I'm still just thinking about the high rise of emotional awareness.
I know.
And trying to relate it in and figure out how to take it out of the astral element from which the original teaching of the emotional guidance system originated, and then to uncorrupt it so that it's more pure, because it hit me in the back. My board fell over on me. No, my board fell over on me yesterday while I was talking with somebody, and it's I had to catch it, and I rubbed off the top of my high rise of emotional awareness, and it's like, okay, I understand, I just don't know what to do about it. So it's just I'm feeling like understanding ascension and descension from the multi-dimensional perspective, including energy, body, spirit, and mind, to bring the cross wholly into the present moment, is how that teaching needs to be modified, which is my deal, but I know you might have something to contribute.
Well, we use the science of the cosmic clock, and we talk about the perversions of the rays, and hatred is a vibration that is a very toxic vibration, and you could probably list that somewhere on your, probably near the bottom of your chart of the emotional hierarchy.
It's 19.
And that is the perversion of love. Pardon me?
It's the 19th. That's
Sorry.
hatred and rage, jealousy, insecurity, unworthiness, and guilt, and then fear, grief, depression, despair, powerlessness at the bottom. So it's 4 up from the lowest emotion on the high rise of emotional awareness from the emotional guidance system. Hatred is.
Yeah, so if you have a challenge with hatred, in that it exists in your consciousness, or it has the ability to be stimulated in your consciousness, that you can be triggered and hatred comes out, that is something that can be transmuted with violet flame, and it takes work. And so every negative emotional expression is simply a misqualified energy pattern. It's pure pristine source energy when it comes to you. But in the moment when you're expressing it, it's being expressed filled with error. It could be hatred, mild dislike, jealousy, whatever it is. It can be transmuted, cleansed, and purified with violet flame. So the expression only is purified, perfected form. We want to be expressing loving kindness. We want to be radiating peace and harmony to all the world. And the challenge is how to do that. It's our energy. It comes to us freely every moment of every day. And we have things that are embedded within our psyche and our subconscious, in our aura, in our electronic belt, that are momentums of past error. So the ability to be triggered will be amplified by the momentum that we're carrying already. And we've got to clean all that out. I had something occurred 2 days ago by which an individual very consciously, very deliberately stole something from me in my presence, and blatantly had the attitude of, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm taking it. And I was stunned, not so much by the act of what occurred, but by what occurred within me. Because faster than I could blink, my adrenaline went through the roof. And I was blown away by the immensity and the power of that surge. Because when I did my cardio workout that night, it was much more intense, and I still couldn't burn off the adrenaline. It took about 18 hours to get that out of my system. And I knew that it was just a different level of a test and initiation that I had to go through. And I knew that my challenge was to maintain my harmony and ensure that the thoughts and the words that came out of me in response to that did not cause disharmony in the world of the individual who was perpetrating this act. That was quite a challenge, because I had not experienced an adrenaline surge like that in well over 10 years. And I had also believed that I was free of that. I didn't think that would ever happen to me. And the fact that it could happen, and that it could happen so quick before I could even halt it, it was a boom. And my adrenaline went through the roof. I made it through the challenge harmoniously. The situation was resolved, and everything was restored. I know that there was some disruption in the consciousness of the other individual, and that was not my doing, because I had to stand up and make a correction. But the real test for me was, how was I going to respond to that adrenaline in that moment, where physiologically it was overwhelming. In the past, if that was me in my youth, I might have been much more dangerous to myself and that individual in terms of my response. I'm grateful I'm not that same person today. But it was a real interesting opportunity to experience a momentum from my electronic belt, ancient karma coming present into the moment so quickly, so powerfully, specifically as a test, as one of my challenges on the path of initiation. Am I really going to be a master, or am I going to be a slave to this impulse pouring through me? And you know, my choice is always discipline is the foundation of freedom. So I had to discipline my response to ensure that only peace and harmony were the result. What a wonderful test.
Yeah, indeed. And it is not fully related, but I'm going to say this because it's nearing the end, in that fewer people came today, and I suspect it's because it's connected to not cutting souls free to be able to do so, because how tired I was all day, had no context, and halfway through this, it was like, oh, now I get it. And so I just share that to say, well done to us for getting on this call and to watching the replay when you get to it as well. But I'm just gonna say, in regards to energy in motion that needs to move, energy can also shift in a way that makes it literally in that moment. Valerie raised her hand and then the screens swapped, which is even just further to the point of just how energy needs to move, and then how the distractions come, and then we don't necessarily go where we needed to go because of the lack of discipline. Not specifically related to this, but in relation to discipline and then the conversation. So I just wanted to bring that up. And Valerie, we will get to your question in a moment. Michael, did you have anything you wanted to say about cutting souls free before moving on to the question?
Not at this time.
Okay. Valerie, yes?
Laura and Michael, and the other person here is Bergie, I think.
Yeah.
I take responsibility for the small group at this time that I needed to speak. It's not about me, but you know what? Valerie needed to speak. Valerie needed to come to know who I am with. Test spirits, good spirit, because certainly if there were more people on here, I would not be being. As I realize this is also live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook land. Whoever is it, tapping in and not even showing themselves. I needed to speak. I needed to meet you. I am here. We have a work to do.
Amen.
So happy.
Welcome.
I'm going to show you my face if I cut out. Here we go. Happy.
I'm glad you could make it, Valerie. And
Wonderful.
get what you needed, and the connection
Thank you.
will be invaluable, and the violet flame will truly be life-changing for the healing and the grief and everything that you've been going through, and anybody that's watching this too. We've got tools, we just weren't aware of them, because previously the gifts from the masters were held in sacred and secret mystery schools. You had to make membership to in order to gain access to. And so part of Michael and I's work together has really been about making sacred information accessible to people that don't necessarily have the ability to know whether they want to make the commitment into a sacred school or a sacred mystery school in order to gain access to the tools. So for anybody that's just dipping your toe in and hearing the information and is really wanting to better understand whether you want to go further, Michael Seegers is who you can connect with in order to take that further. So definitely check out the Shambhala Temple of Light website, show up for the Saturday night calls. We'll do more of these summits so that we can gather and we can talk about various sacred conversations and topics and things that will add value. And if you have questions specifically about what we've talked about tonight or about other areas, please do send me a message. Let me know what those would be. And we're happy to make the conversation available and accessible and inclusive so that no one feels like they have to be left out because their God is in a different box. When I just say, let's just keep your foundation in whatever belief system makes you feel safe. Just let's drop those walls and let the walls be what create the bridge that really bring humanity together, so that no longer do we have to feel separate because we're talking about the same thing using a different word. Any final comments for this evening?
I think we're good.
Amazing. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. Thank you for the participation. Thank you for the willingness to be present, to be seen, and to be vulnerable enough to ask what's required to be able to get to the next level, because ultimately, as Socrates said, the quality of a man's life is directly determined by the quality of questions he's willing to ask. And so I asked, we had this last call, and then we set up this call, and then the questions that are brought forward that help us know what the next conversation needs to be about, that will help us know what we're coming to talk about the next time. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all of the insights, the wisdom, and have a phenomenal night, everyone.
Thank you.